Marnin!
Madnin!
Welcome to the India Explained podcast, recorded in London and San Francisco. One take, unscripted, no rehearsal.
Hey Bunty, greetings from San Francisco. It's a beautiful sunny winter day here, just a little cold. Kind of actually reminds me of some of the November, December days in Bombay and even Calcutta when I was growing up. I believe you had a little bit of snow in London.
That's correct. That's correct. It snowed a little bit in London, which has thrown traffic into a mess. But it's nice, winter's finally showing up, and once this, I hope there's a little more snow, you get the full decorative effect, and then we move on to the rest of the winter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I that kind of reminds me of Atlanta. We used to get snow very occasionally when I lived there, but since it's not a usual snow-based city, a usual city that gets snow, a little bit of snow would kind of throw everything out of gear. And I believe you said that something similar happened in London.
Correct, 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 correct.
So speaking of gears, I think I'm a specialist in segues that don't make much sense, but I keep trying. We've seen a lot of interesting stuff happen in India this year. And where am I going with this? I was just thinking of things cranking into gear, that to stretch that metaphor.
Right, right. Okay.
Very 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 poorly done. It didn't work. But anyway, so I thought we can do this. This is our last episode for the year. In all probability. I just wanted to let our listeners know and thank you for a wonderful year. This was our first year and it was an amazing experience. So I just thought that maybe what we can do, Bunty, is you and I can both talk about what each of us felt were the top three events of significance in the Indian context, and
Okay.
just take it from there. So we can cover everything: politics, society, sports, so on. So do you want to maybe take a stab at the first one?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think that has happened, it's probably a highlight of the general flavor of government and media interactions that have been happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the highlights for me in kind of the serious political place was how the government went after NDTV,
Okay.
right? And I thought that this was in as I reflect through the year, and that set into motion a set of media behavior that you hadn't seen elsewhere up until that point in time. So basically, what happened is the government picked. I'm not saying picked on NDTV because I do not know the full detail of where those cases rest. Because basically they said that you haven't paid tax, so they kept some kind of CBI inquiry hanging over them. And NDTV's point of view was that if you feel there is something wrong, let's go to court. Let's not kind of drag it out. But they did this kind of Damocles number on NDTV, which freaked them out, and it had an impact, which it had an impact on their advertisers because it's a commercially owned station, and what their editorial stance was, etc. But I think what was important was that in doing that as an act, what the government did was chickened all the other media entities out. So as a result, for the rest of 2017, quite a lot of the larger media houses effectively lined up in the slipstream of a particular view that they wanted to take. Now, this is not about channels that have explicitly said that they are going to support the government in power. But I just think that neutrality these days, the idea of media neutrality has shifted. So for me, the big story was the fact that established media organizations, having seen what happened to an organization like NDTV, started aligning and kind of slightly smoothing out their rough edges vis-a-vis the reporting about this government, which for people like us who are sitting on the sidelines and periodically commenting on topical or atopical fun issues, I think it's a huge opportunity because I'd say that there is nobody holding the sword to our neck, so we can pretty much call out what we want. So that, Rohit, was my first point, that that NDTV episode and the subsequent alignment of media, to me, in 2017 has to be one of the big things that has happened in India.
Yeah, I I agree with you about the enormous significance of that because NDTV, rightly or wrongly, was perceived as pro-Congress, bastion of, quote unquote progressive values, or in the extreme Bhakt mindset, a kind of anti-Hindu values and so on. And I think a message was sent to them kind of loud and clear. So and I think, to me, something very interesting has happened, that NDTV since then has been definitely pursuing a more compliant line. I had a exchange of tweets with a couple of people who work in NDTV, Nidhi Razdan and Srinivasan Jain, regarding the fact that, in my view, NDTV fell hook, line and sinker for a certain story that was brought out regarding Justice Loya. The judge who was trying Amit Shah and then whose death was deemed to be suspicious. So
Right.
Caravan had done a story, and then what happened is, in the Indian Express there was an alternative story which said that everything is fine, there's no problem. But that story had gaping holes in it, and there's a friend of mine who works as a very senior journalist in a reputed Indian newspaper. I can't name him because he's requested confidentiality, but he sent me a message, a private message, saying that story was an obvious plant. We also got the same story this morning, and we decided not to run it. I'm surprised that Express's editor and NDTV ran it. So long and short is that, there were just glaring holes in that story. So the story said that everything was fine with Justice Loya's electrocardiogram report, but the report that the ECG report that they actually showed was from a day before Judge Loya died. And NDTV was, so I just made a couple of remarks saying that it's just, NDTV's kind of fallen prey to this and they've not followed up. And they got, very, very touchy. I think both of them saying that these are conspiracy theories and so on. But I know that Barkha Dutt, who was with NDTV for many years and has resigned, she had also protested the fact that I think an interview with Chidambaram was not carried, and then there were some other things that NDTV sort of refused to carry. So they've, sort of fallen in line, and it's not that, like the other channels, they will take up, this is my sense, they take up an issue against the BJP where it's a complete black and white issue, right? That if a BJP leader is saying something completely outrageous, of course they'll run a story. Even the very pro-BJP channels will run a story because, it's just an open and shut case. But these other cases where there is a journalistic story, but that could do serious damage to the BJP, that I am noticing NDTV is now kind of hesitating from taking on. I should also add that before NDTV, Rajdeep Sardesai and Sagarika Ghosh, they were both pushed out of Network 18 when Network 18 was bought over by the Ambanis. And I believe, from what I hear and from what people tell me, one of the conditions was that, of the takeover, like, it was completely understood that Rajdeep and Sagarika have to be pushed out because of their perceived, anti-Modi stance. And Rajdeep Sardesai is now in the India Today group. To just add to that, I would say that space has been taken over by Wire and to a certain extent maybe a couple of other publications. So that brings me to one of my most significant events, since we're talking about news. And I could either say it is a particular story done by The Wire. In my view, it's the story about Amit Shah's son's assets zooming astronomically after Amit Shah became the party president and after Modi came to power. Now, in and of itself, you could say that story is, significant, but not inordinately significant. But to me, it's what the story symbolizes that gives it its significance, because it signifies many things. One is, I think it's a moment where the media, or at least some aspects of the media, are beginning to speak up more critically. And Amit Shah has been kind of untouchable. Modi people have been infatuated with. Arun Jaitley somehow, even in, right across, he sort of has friends in every television channel. He manages to keep himself out of the news. So he's another story in himself. But what was very significant was that, I think it marked a kind of shift, and it just showed that it could be done. A case was slapped against The Wire, against some bogus kind of case. They went down to Ahmedabad, and I think the ruling was in their favor. I think there was some defamation case. So to me, that was very significant. It signified also the fact that online media and an upstart like The Wire, was doing the kind of journalism that the big television and even print publications were not doing. And finally, I think it also points to, the fact that, are we seeing the emergence of a kind of alternative online media? The Wire is certainly prominent there. Scroll is not quite as political as The Wire, I would say, but it does some good work. And then there are a couple of these publications called one is called Alt News, which is run by Prateek Sinha, which busts a lot of fake news stories. And the other one is called Janta Ka Reporter, which is run by a journalist called Rifat Javed. And Janta Ka Reporter, as we speak, have just done a story that a company with connections to Amit Shah's family has made several thousand crores in government contracts over the last few years. So that is my first sort of significant event.
Okay. On the second thing that I wanted to talk about was the idea of I have to talk about cricket because it's one of the things that I've followed closely over the years, and I think the way and one particular cricketer I would like to single out, Virat Kohli, and the other person in his kind of in the same context is Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Now, these are two remarkable individuals, and I just think that this is the one year where I have noticed that there's been a transition from one great sporting person to potentially another great sporting person, where both people have accommodated each other's shortcomings and strengths, and have done so symbiotically. So on the cricket field, the one story that was, for me, remarkable in 2017 was the transition of Dhoni from a great captain to a kind of a senior figure in the team who would kind of play a critical role in the limited over formats, and Virat Kohli was left alone to get on with the business of building his credibility and strength in all of the other forms of cricket. What is really important in that story for me is how that transition happened, as in the person who was the captain didn't try and usurp what the new captain's role, tone, and texture of interaction would be. The new captain at the same time carried himself in a manner which was very accommodating of the previous incumbent in the office. And I think business, I think politics, I think quite a lot of our day-to-day lives has a lot to learn from the way this transition was managed. And I just think, put aside the tamasha of the management of Kumble and Shastri, that natak that happened on the side, put that to one side. I think this transition between two very capable people was something that was really heartening for me. And I do hope that businesses, and particularly businesses that transition leadership teams, realize that, the previous incumbent's work is not necessarily always to be debunked. The way that you make your mark is not by saying your history was useless and without any value, and everything needs to be forward facing. So I think that's really worked well for me from this cricketing sphere. So that would be my second story.
Yeah, and I don't think I could disagree with the significance of that at all. It's been an amazing experience watching Kohli bat, and I have to say that after I sort of waxed and waned with cricket after Tendulkar retired. I really felt that and even I would say that last couple of years he was playing, not because of his playing in particular, but just generally my interest in cricket had dipped, and I did feel that twinge of sadness like millions others when Tendulkar retired, and I felt that my interest in cricket would not quite be the same in some ways because Tendulkar had been such a formative part of public life and of the cricketing experience, but seeing Kohli has been an absolute revelation. And the play has been, spectacular. And I think that it's a very good point you make about the lack. I think we're seeing a shift in culture where there's an earlier tradition of parochialism has kind of ebbed away, which to me sort of bodes very well for Indian cricket. So I'm, going to move to a more grim, event. As my second event, and I think it again is something that reflects a larger pattern, and I think one could argue that the events that you suggested do that too. Starting in 2015 or 14, these attacks on Muslims, I think the last of them was something we saw recently, last week. It was absolutely horrific, on this ground of marrying a Muslim Hindu woman, which our horrible media has been normalizing as love jihad. They're taking this accusatory term and making it out to be a crime. which has the effect of suggesting that, this Muslim man who was hacked to death and then burnt alive, I think, um, by a Hindu in Rajasthan on grounds of associating with a Muslim woman, that somehow he brought this on himself. But to me, this as well as the earlier event in June 23, a 15-year-old boy, Junaid Khan, he was stabbed to death by a group of men aboard a train. And this is from the Washington Post. Was going home to a village, Khandavli, a village in the North Indian state of Haryana, after shopping for new clothes in New Delhi. I think it was Eid shopping, and a mob mocked their skull caps and taunted them for eating beef. So this has been a very, I think, dismaying pattern that continued. And around the time this happened, there were a number of articles in the Indian and international press about Modi's silence. That's kind of a side consequence that goes with it. So I think that the frightening thing about this is, the event itself is absolutely horrific, but tragic as it is, there have been events of this scale of violence that have happened in India, this level of brutality. They've sort of been routine in India for as long as I can remember. But the thing is that, this discourse of love jihad, the anti-Muslim, diatribes, the suspicion on Muslims, on minorities generally, the idea of this hyper-nationalism, the free pass given to Gaurakshas, Bajrang Dal, VHP, all of which has enabled this violence. So this has been a very distressing development, I would say, in 2017, and I'm hoping that maybe the pendulum starts, swinging in the other direction.
Yeah, I think, Rohit, you make a very interesting point, and a grim point at that, which is that, when people are being killed in the name of particular religious practices in India, whether it is for, consuming what they eat, who they marry, who they love, how they pray, it puts us as a nation, because I think one of the best things about India is that it has been accommodating, and I think perhaps the reason the pendulum swung one way is it's been accommodating in a particularly self-serving electoral vote bank type of way. And I think some of the adjustments that need to happen. But I think the broader point that you're making is of violence against minorities in the country, in media, or certain sections of the media, is a very, very disturbing thing. And what people, in the small measure that we can, like us, should use our opportunities and kind of independent voices to say that this is wrong. The thing that is cool and interesting about India is that it accommodates everybody equally. And I think going forward in the next few years of this government, I hope these kind of practices are cracked down upon and prevented, because it's wholly unbecoming of us as a nation, because we are slipping into becoming an Iran or a Pakistan, which we were not and we don't want to be, or a Saudi Arabia, and it's very disturbing. So that's a good shout out. The second point. How are we doing for time, Rohit? Do we have another some time for a second, third point?
Sure. Let's make a third point. It'll be a long episode, but it's the end of the year, and I'm sure our listeners will indulge us on this one episode. What would your third event be?
Okay, the third thing that I wanted to talk about was, obviously, in India, there are three things that, for me, make up the rubric of our nation. One is the politics, one is the cricket, and I've kind of made a comment on politics, made a comment on cricket. Obviously, the third bit is entertainment and showbiz. And I think one of the interesting things, or one of the sad things that happened this year, was quite a lot of actors kind of passed on. Vinod Khanna, Shashi Kapoor, and Om Puri are the three people who come readily to mind. And not that I was a particular fan of each and any one of them, but I think one of the things that I think was common to the film stars of that generation, as it were, was that they were practicing their craft in a time when scrutiny of how they behaved and how they interacted and how they dealt with fans was almost at an arm's length. They didn't have to deal with social media. They didn't have to kind of micromanage and get confessional about each and every aspect of their lives. And I think in their passing, I think what is happening is a generation of actors are now passing on who perhaps we only know as people who appeared on screen. So they live in our minds as, fantastical hero-like figures. And I think the modern day crop of heroes, we know where they eat their vada pav, we know where they eat their ice cream, we know how many times they texted whom. So I just think, so in the call out that I have is, I think our film industry is changing, and the heroes of our times are very different from the ones that have gone before. And I think this year, more than ever, two seminal kind of classical heroes, Shashi Kapoor and Vinod Khanna, have passed on. I don't think their public life had as much scrutiny. Our only imagined view of them is in their cinematic existence. And I think that is not going to be the case for the Shah Rukh Khans and the Amir Khans of the world, or, the Ajay Devgans of the world, because their lives, and Akshay Khanna's, their lives are more open, Saif Ali Khan, to scrutiny and ready commentary. So that's kind of the final observation, that I think the last of the cinematic heroes, where their life ended at the cinematic kind of, as the movie ended, their lives and your knowledge of them ended, is kind of passing with the passing of these heroes.
It's an excellent point, and it's very interesting, because I was also going to make an observation about the world of, I would just call it arts and cultural expression, intellectual production broadly, artistic production particularly. So to me, it's the last final event is in some ways a kind of non-event that this may be a function of my own prejudices, biases, tastes, whatever you want to call them, my distance from India, but I did not see any work of art, whether it's a novel or a film, of exceptional quality that came out of India this year. There's nothing I can think of. I know that there have been, some marvelous films made. Now this, again, it may be my ignorance. There may be some, wonderful cinema that's come out. I did see, maybe I want to partially take this back. I did enjoy the film Newton very much. I thought it was a tremendous film. But the larger point I want to make here is that what's happened to the artistic, the sort of apparatus of artistic and intellectual production is, again, I think it's kind of taken a hit, partly with what the BJP has done, but I don't want to just blame the BJP for this. It's true that the BJP government, went after artists. It went, a lot of whom returned their awards. It is sort of anti-intellectual. It's given a space to really kind of people who are unqualified and who espouse the worst kind of sentiments. But I think there's been a larger sort of trend of, anti-intellectualism, kind of commodification of art, and a tamasha air to the whole process of artistic production in India. So I think these lit fests, have become a complete joke. And this year for me, I think the turning point was, Baba Ramdev being invited to some lit fest, which was sponsored by Rajnigandha. The Z Lit Fest is, it's got some association with the Rajasthan government, and that Rajasthan is just seeing the most, heinous kind of crimes against Dalits, against Muslims. And, artists, intellectuals, writers, these are supposed to be people who you expect will speak truth to power. It's a bit of a romantic idea, but that's at least been one of the functions that they've fulfilled historically. And there's been a sort of conspicuous absence by this. So in some ways, I would say the co-option of the artistic intellectual production apparatus, to use some, a phrase like that, by the state has been, for me, very, very distressing. And I'm kind of hoping that, we see some more interesting work that comes at the margins. Anyone and everyone who can string together 3 sentences in English is writing a novel, but most of them are, utterly mediocre and forgettable. So I hope that in 2018 we, see some shift, or at least we see some kind of alternate space. And maybe this is something, we can think about ways in which to sort of create that space.
That's a very, very interesting observation, Rohit, that, there's a proliferation of quantity, not quality. And so we look forward to reading things, or watching productions that are, really resonate with, this a world standard, as opposed to kind of consumed within kind of small alcoves of kind of patronage. So that's a really interesting point that you made. So look, we've kind of talked about the 3 things that we promised, 3 things that matter to each of us through 2017. I think as we end this episode, I'd like to thank all our listeners who have listened to us at this kind of very formative first year stage of our podcast. It's been really enjoyable for me and Rohit to get in touch with each other every week, week on week, and do this. So for the moment, we are going to say goodbye. Have a wonderful New Year celebration, and a wonderful Christmas and a festive period, restful holidays, and we will be back with renewed energy for 2018 for more of the India Explained podcast. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah, I echo that. Just thank you again to all our listeners. This has been an amazing journey for us, and we're still learning. We have some interesting changes lined up, but I don't want to put the proverbial cart before the horse. We'll talk about them when we are back. So just have a wonderful year. May 2018 have a wonderful rest of the year. May 2018 be a lovely year as well for all of you. And yeah, we'll see you guys, and looking forward to it. Okay. All right, Bantu. Take care.
All right. Take care, man. Take care. Bye-bye.